said, no, we had some discussions about measurement and scaling, and we know that this measurement and scaling broadly talks about data. It talks about measuring data and arriving at a conclusion to maybe as a solution to a problem, or maybe as some development of some model. In that context, we are discussing about measurement and scaling. And we had also said that based on the nature of the data, that is quantitative and qualitative data, the measurements, the type of measurements which we use for study also will vary. And also the type of data is influencing our choice of different scaling techniques. So that's where that's where we stopped in our previous class. In our today's class, I'm going to introduce you with one type of scaling which is very popular among social science researchers or social science scientists, which is Likert scale. It is basically, if somebody asks me, can you say something about Likert scale in few words, I would say it is actually a summated scale that is used to study different variables or different aspects or different constructs in a particular study. So why do we say summated? Say, for example, if I want to learn about the perception of consumers towards a product, naturally I cannot or I may not be able to express their perception or ask them to express their perception in one or two words. I should give them different choices which are different attributes to that term called perception. So I have to give them some different angle. I have to enable them to look at the concept of perception from different angle, and then answer whether what is their perception or maybe in the case of attitude towards a particular product or brand. So that is why we say that Likert scale, we have the freedom to establish this into different statements and finally arrive that with a summated value. So for example, if I'm measuring, as I said, if I'm going with measurement of perception, I have certain variables which I will establish as statements in my measurement, in my scale, and then the summated, the total value of all these scales, the result, all these statements which I have got as my result would be the scoring to that particular variable called perception, or that identified variable called perception. So I will have, okay, how often do you purchase? Do you recommend this product? Or maybe I would say, what is the level of your understanding regarding the ingredients or the content? It depends on the type of product I'm studying. Okay, then will you come back again to purchase it? So I am going to include many statements in a scale form, and the summation maybe 5 to 10. Normally it will range from 6 to 10. Because for me to use some statistical tools, I have to qualify with some level of scoring. So for that purpose, I will use some 5 to 10 or 6 to 8 sentences, statements, and the summated value, the summated scores of all that would be my item analysis approach. So, large number of statements expressing favorable or unfavorable attitude towards an object, towards a variable identified, will give me the summated score that is required for understanding a particular variable. So that is actually the concept of Likert scale. That's why we say that it is a summated scale. It gives us a little more superior data rather than just concluding our survey with 1 or 2 questions. Superior data because you are enabling the respondent to look at a particular phenomenon, identified variable from different angles. maybe we, when we are developing this the scale, the summated scale for a variable, for example the one which we were discussing, that is perception, we might look into the theoretical perspective. We might look into the areas or qualities that need to be included in while measuring the this particular variable, that is perception, and we prepare the scale and the total. That's why we say it's summated. The total of that will give us scoring for the as we say, the scoring for that variable called perception. So it is a superior one. It is little more in the higher order, which gives us little more clarity towards what's the real scenario in that, or in respect to that particular aspect under study. So that is all about Likert scale. Now we are going to look into the concept of the qualifications or the features that are required for different measurement tools. Okay, there's different measurement tools that we use for our study, for collecting data. Primarily, that depends on validity, yeah, reliability, accuracy. I have put that in different: reliability, practicability, accuracy. So these are the four features that should be there, that should be part of every measurement instrument which we are considering for our study. Now I will take one by one. Validity, I repeat, validity, reliability, accuracy, and of course, when we are talking about practicability, in the sense it should be in a way it is no, it is within our hands, within our boundaries. It should be feasible enough for us to operate on it. So that's what we call as the as you say, practicability. So let's take up the first feature, the most important feature of a measurement tool, that is validity. Now, validity, there are different types of validity, but broadly, every instrument should qualify with these four types of validity. One is content, criterion related, phase, and construct validity, which is supposed to be the most difficult one to obtain, even though we have different statistical tools for measuring that. Even softwares are there for measuring construct validity, but it is something which is difficult when compared with other types of validity. Now let's take the first one, content validity. Now content validity, as I was saying, when I'm taking a term called perception, okay, perception of consumers, or I'm looking at perception of consumers towards a particular brand. In that case, I should make sure that I've included all the topics that are needed for measuring that variable under study. That's what we call as content. And do I have the content enough to measure that particular topic under study? That's what we say. Content validity is coverage of topic under study. We should be able to cover all the concepts, all the areas under our study, because otherwise it's a handicap study. I'm going to measure perception in my own way, like taking one or two variables. That's actually something which we have designed. Even if suppose the scope of our study does not allow to go with measuring this variable using all possible angle or different all possible areas, then definitely that should be quoted as our limitation in our study. We have limited the scope of study to these two aspects. We have just measured these two aspects in our study, and we have eliminated the other features or other factors because of maybe practicability, because of the convenience, because of the time. There can be several reasons, but we have to. That should be the limitation of our study. So we have to ensure that all possible theories, all possible topics covered in that variable, covered which is related with that variable, should be included under our study, content validity. And normally what we do is we look into different literatures which are connected with that. We speak with experts. We give our instrument for validation with them. We give them to practical practitioners. So all this will enable us to identify, to recognize whether we have covered all what is required for our for measuring this these variables which we have identified for our study. So that is content validity. Are we covering the topic as such completely? Right? That is content validity. The second one is criterion related validity. And criterion related validity is something which is very much related to the outcome which we expect. We are looking into certain criteria, right? We want, no, say for example, we want to develop a model. A model means there is some kind of relationship established between the variables. You have to have a relation. Maybe you're going with an input output system, so you have to establish a relationship between the input variables, right? What is happening in between, maybe we call that as a process, and the output what we get, there should be some relation that is established. So criterion related validity mainly checks up with those factors, whether the instrument is sophisticated enough to get the result, to predict the outcome what we expect, to get the result what we expect. Which means, see, if I'm going to say that I'm going to study the relationship between sales personnel's training and their attitude towards their job. Okay, so I want to establish a relationship between training as well as the attitude of sales personnel towards the work. So definitely my instrument should be in a position to establish the relationship between these two. I have to find out, I have to have enough data with respect to training and how effective is this training to bring a change in the attitude of salespersons. I have to have that. That's what we mean by criterion related validity. And I often tell my students, please check in that way. Because when we are talking about our relationship, when we are talking about a topic which has some connections between each variables, we really have to ensure that are they intertwined, are they connected? If not, how do we come up with no, sometimes students know they maybe they are very new to that, but they forget to bring some questions or some maybe questions that will enable them to measure a particular variable, say effectiveness of training. They forget that title would be training and the perception or attitude of a salesperson towards work. But then they may not be having any variables, any questions to measure the aspect of effectiveness of training. Then you're not in a position to get the output as you require. So that is where we say that we have to ensure that there is criterion related validity with respect to our studies, right? Now the next one is face validity. Face validity, again, it's pretty easy. We really have to ensure that are we measuring what we are supposed to measure? We've identified many variables. So we have to check whether are we doing it in the right way? Are we measuring? Say, for example, I'll share with you my experience. See, I had put my title as translational education. Translational education and internationalization in education. Those two words are often used interchangingly, but they carry different meaning. They carry different meaning actually. Transnational and international. Internationalization is a macro perspective, whereas translational education is very well defined and there is a definition of what all can be included under translation. But this one is a generic term. So I have to ensure that I have enough aspects of translational education in my topic. It's not the generic internationalization. I have to bring all the terms, all the concepts which are related with Transnational education, when I'm looking at a topic of transnational education in India, if it was the case of internationalization, maybe I could have gone a little more generic, a little more wider, a little more into a macro perspective. But when I've chosen a topic of measuring transnational education in Indian higher education sector, I really have to ensure that all what is included in transnational education under the concept of translational education is there as part of my study. So that is what we call as phase validity, right? Now, the next one is construct validity. As I said, construct validity is the most difficult one because here we are looking at the degree to which scores on a test can be accounted for by the explanatory constructs of that sound theory. Already there is some theory with respect to what is the scoring should no, a relationship. When do you say that a relationship is a good one? There is a scoring for that. When do you say that a relationship is a spurious one? There is a scoring. So my measurement instrument should be in such a way that I have to capture the data. Okay, I have to capture the data which can enable me to reach the scoring that is required for accepting my relationship, accepting my theory, accepting my concept. So that is something which is very difficult for us to test it. Of course, there are tests which is looking at construct validity. You have to have that scoring no, with every relationship, with every variable identified for your study, the minimum scoring is required to qualify that relationship, to to go with further analysis, establishing a relationship between the variables. So that talks about the statistical values which you require to qualify the kind of relationship. That also again is dependent on the ability of our measurement instrument to capture the information. If the measurement instrument is in such a way that we could capture the information as per our requirement, automatically we will have a scoring that can qualify or disqualify a particular aspect. Sometimes there may not be a relationship, but our instrument should be capable enough to to undergo such testing. That is what we call as construct validity. So our construct identifier for the study, if we have to proceed further with our relationship, it has to have that required score for further analysis. Structural. This is normally very important when we go with structural analysis in cross-sectional study. We call structural equation modeling and all in cross-sectional study. That is where we go with this construct val. So these are there are different types of validity, but the four most important types of validity that should be there as part of an instrument is content validity, which talks about coverage of the topic; criterion validity, which relates to the ability of an instrument to predict some outcome; phase validity, the ability of an instrument to measure the features what it is supposed to the construct validity, that is the scoring required to establish or maybe eliminate or avoid. It should be able to give some scoring, okay, which is explanatory to the theory concepts, to the theoretical aspects. That scoring should be, say for example, normally we find a relationship between price and demand. Now, if we get a scoring that there exists no relationship between price and demand, maybe in some markets that is okay. Say when you talk about luxury goods, premium luxury goods, maybe there is no relationship between price and demand. But when we are looking into our consumer durable market, there is, especially in a country like India, consumers are price conscious. Right. And if my output says that there is no relationship between price and demand, it's against the theory. Right. So there can sometimes that it is because of a particular situation, but in normal case that is because of the inability of an instrument to establish the real relationship by through its score. Your data, that instrument should be able to capture the data in order to come up with those scores. That's actually what we call as construct validity. Now we are going further. Uh, now, the next concept which we said at the beginning is reliability. See, reliability, the only thing which you have to remember about reliability is if I'm using the same instrument, same conditions, and almost similar respondents, but every time when I conduct the study, I get different results, then I say that my study is totally unreliable. Nobody can look at my study and take some decision. Right. If my study, normally we say that in lab and all, yes, experiments, it should be reliable. Every time when you conduct that experiment, you should get the same results. Chemical reactions. When I mix two chemicals, the kind of result I expect is same. Same way in social research also, if I have to take some, if I have to recommend some decisions, recommend some, no, maybe some suggestions, or I have to, if I have to ensure that my model is acceptable, there should be some sort of real reliability, at least in the near future. Because maybe over the time people will change, environment will change, conditions will change, so accordingly we have to incorporate the changes in the environment. See, no, when I'm no I will tell my experience when I've done capital market and a study on capital market, a research on capital market efficiency, efficiency of capital market tools. I said, yes, this during the period of study, this is the kind of results I got. Maybe because of the changes in the market environment, the results may vary. So the investors need to accommodate the changes when you are taking decisions based on my suggestion. That's a precautionary note. There can be changes, but at least during the time of the conduct of your study, you should have some kind of consistent results. That's what we call as reliability. And reliability is dependent on stability of, see, how can I ensure that my results are consistent, reliable? One way is I have to standardize my conditions. I have to say that I'm going to conduct suppose if I'm going to study an arts and science college student, I say that my research is being conducted in an arts and in the environment of an arts and science college, or maybe in a university environment, which includes both professional and other arts, other humanities courses. Yeah. Non-professional courses, and the students are between the age group of 18 to maybe 25, right? So that is the kind of standardization I'm going to expect, for my study, right? So those are the conditions. Then I really have to give directions both to the respondents as well as maybe the field investigators who are going for collecting the data. Yes, this is how each question needs to be approached. This is how you have to explain these questions to the respondents so they will understand and answer. So those are carefully designing and carefully giving directions so that you have some standardized environment in which you are conducting the study. So if you've standardized all that, if you have set a particular framework, okay, this is my framework, that's what we call as the research design. Right, I have a design, I have a sample design, I have a research design as such, and this is the framework where I'm going to conduct my study. That's what we call a standardization. That's very much needed to ensure the concept of reliability in our research. Right? So that's concept of reliability. Reliability is nothing but consistent results. At least we cannot ensure that my research is going to give me the same result after 10 years. No, it's not possible in a social science research, but at least during the period, within the near vicinity. Otherwise, how can anybody or any person depend on my studies and take some meaningful corrections or meaningful step towards the development of their business or some scenario? That's why we say that there should be reliability with respect to our scientific findings. Right? Then practicability. Practicability, I put three words. One is economy. See, I said Some of you, I don't know, when you have done your research, knowingly or unknowingly, you have put one of your limitation as lack of money or lack of time, lack of some other facility. But these cannot be quoted as a limitation, because at the start of your work itself, you have to ensure that you have enough resources to proceed with this work. It's practicable in your context. That's what we call as practicability. So that testing, that as you say, enforcement or that verification has to happen before you go with your study. And accuracy. Accuracy is a matter of how far we are able to bring real actual scenario into our findings. If we are very much far away from the real condition, nobody will be able to accept the research findings which we have published as a great achievement. So that's what we call as accuracy. We should be able to capture the real condition and bring our findings very near to the actual conditions. That's what we call as accuracy. That needs a lot of patience, lot of passion, as well as lot of effort from part of the researcher. So the other features is practicability and accuracy. So these are the four basic features that is required by a data measurement tool. One is validity, which talks about the outcome of your result. Second one is reliability, which talks about consistency. Third, which talks about the feasibility of conducting a study. That is what we call as practicability. And fourth one is accuracy, how far we are able to relate that to the actual condition. So these are the four important features that is required for every data collection instrument, for every measurement tool. Right. Now we are going into the next part, which is, we already discussed about scaling techniques. Some of it we had used for our study also. So this is just overview of all what we have been discussing. Scaling techniques, broadly, we can classify that into two. One is comparative scaling techniques, another one is non-comparative scaling techniques. And in comparative, as the name indicates, in comparative scaling techniques, there is some kind of comparison which is made, which enables the respondent to choose the best. The best example which you would be able to understand is, you're giving the names of few brands and you will ask which one you prefer the most. That is, you enable them, you give them a chance to compare, and then you ask them to choose from it. So such types of scales, we call that as comparative scaling techniques. And non-comparative is more or less open-ended. You give them the chance. You ask the respondents to maybe respond from their personal experience. So that is non-comparative scaling techniques. And within comparative scaling techniques, we are very common with the paired comparison. As I said, the example of 2 or 3 brands. I'm pairing it with few and I'm asking the respondent to pick the best one or the first one. If I give them a chance to rank them in the order of preference, then that is what we call as ranking them. So maybe I give them 10 brands and I ask them to rank in the order of their preference. That is rank order. If I'm just giving few and asking them to pick one, that is paired comparison. Constant sumness, say, I'll share with the experience of my researcher, my research scholar for PhD. She is doing on tourism, coastal tourism. So this particular scaling is used by her in the context that she would like to know how much an international tourist will spend when he or she arrives in our country. Okay, so she has collected the data on an average. This is the amount which is being spent by international tourists when they are in India, and then she is giving them a constant sum. Imagine that is 40,000 or 50,000, and then she's asking them to give specific amount in different areas, like how much you spend for transportation, how much you spend for hotel accommodation, how much you spend for food, how much you're going to spend for the other expenses like games or other purchase, shopping, like different conditions, different aspects are being given, and a constant sum is given. If you're given with this much, what is the percentage you are going to spend for this? How much is it you're going to spend for transportation? How much is going to is that you're going to spend? So what is the percentage? So that amount in what, if you're given with 1 lakh, out of that, how much is going towards transportation? What is the amount that is going for maybe stay? What is the amount that is going for food? That's actually constant sum. Okay, that's what we call as constant sum. So comparative scaling broadly that comes under paired comparison, rank comparison, and as you said, a constant comparison. Now, non-comparative scale is very popular among all of us. The first one is continuous rating, where we give 5-point or 7-point or 10-point scales, and they are asked to pick the right one for them. Then itemized scaling, that is what we talked about, Likert scale, where we say that, say for example, I put an example as leadership. I want to measure the qualities that are required for a leader. I want to measure the leadership qualities in a particular person. So I give many questions. I develop a scale which includes many questions which are related with different attributes that are required for a person to be a leader. And so I have scale items. First I will identify 5 or 6 variables that are required for becoming a leader. Then I will include 6 to 8 questions in each variable. Those are what we call as scale items. So I'm giving them scale items. Say for example, if I'm going to give as leadership, one quality is authority. And if I'm giving few scale questions for the scale items under that, then automatically that will be my scale items for that variable. So that's why it is itemized scale. I will have for every item, I will have few statements, few scaled items, scale items. For every variable, few scale items. That's what we call as itemized scaling. Multiple category, the best example is, do you prefer or do you use the common question which you use? Are you aware about mobile banking services? The answer you can give is yes, no. You're given a multiple choice for them. You can give an answer as yes or no. Correct? So that is what you call as multiple category. If you want to give frequency for that, you will give the question is how far you use mobile banking services. You want to ask them frequently or sometimes, rarely, never. That's another way of asking. Never will give no, and you have given different frequency for yes, frequently, very often, or sometimes, rarely. So you're given a band, a spread to that yes. Never is, of course, no. That is, so somewhere we have given that we have taken that question in a different way, which is little more good when we look into the type of statistical tools which we can use. So that is actually verbal frequency scale. It's all we are very much familiar. The only thing is that we have put names for that. So scaling techniques, we can broadly classify that as comparative and non-comparative scaling. And in comparative scaling, we have paired comparison where we give a choice to the respondent, they choose from it, and then they're asked to sometimes rank in the order of their preference, that's rank order, or constant sum when they're given with an amount and they're asked how much is it you're spending, or what is the preference of your investment, how much of your money you will invest in, say, mutual fund, or maybe you will ask derivative markets, stock markets, bank deposit. So you're giving them a percentage. So you just want to know what is their risk appetite. So that is constant sum method. Non-comparative scaling technique, here this continuous scale which we are very familiar with, scaling 5-point, 6-point scaling. The next step of that is, along with that, we identify scale items. It is consolidated, as we say in the case of Likert scale. We want to measure a variable. We have identified different features of that variable, or maybe a construct, different variables that will qualify to measure that construct, and then we will follow scale items, and the summated value of that will give us the measurement for that particular variable. That's what we call as itemized scale. Multiple category, yes or no. When we give little more frequency to that yes, we call that as verbal frequency scale. We ask them with respect to the frequency of using a particular service or product or like that. So that's all about scaling. So in this complete module, which was spread into 2-3 classes, we had been discussing about the measurement and scaling. What is actually measurement? What are the factors we have to go with when we develop a measurement instruments? And what are the factors that will decide for us to choose a particular measurement tool and different types of measurement tools? And we also looked into scaling. How do we put our question in order to ensure that we get the right kind of data? And we have told scaling depends on the nature of our data, and we have told we have classified data broadly into nominal or some which we can arrange in order called as ordinal, or as we can know, if we can establish them into scale, that is scale, and if we can specify the distance between each scale, that becomes ratio scale. Then in our today's class, we discussed about different types of scaling techniques, where we broadly classify that into comparative and non-comparative scaling. Right.